How has your day been so far? Hello, we're AETA Stories, and today we're sharing a brand new original story with you.
Rachel's birthday arrived quietly without ceremony. Outside, Portland's winter pressed its cold palms against the windows, the streetlights casting pale halos on the falling snow. Inside the apartment, the living room looked almost staged, tidy, neutral, careful, like a place where emotion had learned to keep its voice low. Daniel stood near the center of the room, holding a large shopping bag with a ribbon tied around the handles. His posture was composed, his expression practiced. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the warmth Rachel remembered from the early years of their marriage. "Happy birthday," he said evenly. Rachel brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear and forced a smile. Her heart lifted despite itself. For months, she had tried not to hope, but hope slipped in anyway, quiet and persistent. They had talked about a fur coat once, half a year ago, during a walk past a boutique window. She had stopped, just for a second, admiring the cut, the color, the way it seemed to promise warmth and elegance all at once. Daniel had noticed. He always noticed things like that, even if he rarely acted on them. "Go on," he said now, glancing at his watch. "Open it. We don't have much time before dinner." The bag felt heavier than Rachel expected. That struck her first. As she pulled the ribbon loose, the paper rustled softly. A dark fur appeared, thick, dense, unfamiliar. Not the smooth, glossy texture she remembered from the display window, but something heavier, older. When she lifted it free, a faint, unmistakable smell reached her, mothballs, something sweet and stale beneath it. The coat was well made, durable, but it wasn't new. The lining, once white, had yellowed with age. The cuffs were worn where hands had brushed them again and again. Rachel stood there, holding it, the room suddenly too quiet. Daniel shifted his weight, watching her closely. "This is," Rachel began, then stopped. She searched for a word that wouldn't sound like an accusation. "It's vintage." He gave a short, humorless laugh and poured himself a glass of water. "Money isn't happiness," he said after a moment, as if delivering a conclusion he had rehearsed. "Practicality is. Real fur. They don't make it like this anymore. It's warm, reliable, not like those overpriced things you were looking at, just rags for glamorous fools." Rachel ran her hand over the stiff fur. It felt toujours foreign, borrowed. "It's used," she said quietly. "Someone else wore this. So what?" Daniel set the glass down with a firm tap. "What difference does it make? Money is in circulation right now. I can't pull out huge sums for whims." Whims. The word barely made it past her lips. She remembered him talking about a big deal, a successful quarter, new investments. She remembered believing him. "You promised," she said, her voice low. "You said things were going well." "They are," he snapped, turning toward the window. "But that doesn't mean wasting money. Look outside. Isn't it beautiful? Snow lights. Romancy. And you're thinking about price tags." "I'm not thinking about price tags," Rachel said. "I'm thinking about honesty." Before Daniel could respond, the bedroom door flew open and Noah ran in, still in his dinosaur pajamas. He crossed the room in seconds and wrapped his arms around Rachel's legs. "Mom." "Happy birthday," he said, grinning up at her. "Dad gave you a coat? Can I see?" Rachel blinked quickly and knelt, forcing the tightness in her throat down where Noah couldn't see it. She held the coat out. Noah touched the fur, delighted. "Wow," he said. "You'll look like a snow queen." Daniel smiled, satisfied. "See? Even a child understands." Noah looked up at his mother, suddenly serious. "You're beautiful in any coat," he said. "Even in your jacket. Don't be sad." "I'm not," Rachel said, hugging him tightly, breathing in the clean scent of his shampoo, trying to erase the jour smell of the coat. "Just got something in my eye." Daniel clapped his hands once. "All right, I booked a table for 7. You've got half an hour. And wear the coat. We should take the gift out. I don't want to, Rachel said quietly. Don't embarrass me, Daniel replied. I said wear it. When he left the room, Rachel remained kneeling, Noah's arms still around her neck. She smiled for him the way she always did, and swallowed the ache that told her something had shifted, something small, perhaps, but irreversible. The first crack had appeared, and even in her denial, she felt the cold beginning to creep through. Dinner plans had been decided without discussion. Daniel's expectations lingered in the apartment even after he stepped into the shower, as if his certainty had weight. Rachel stayed behind, standing in the living room with the coat draped over the back of the couch, dark and heavy against the neutral fabric. She touched it again, slower this time, tracing the seams with careful fingers. The smell still bothered her. It wasn't strong, but it was persistent, the kind that clung to memory rather than fabric. Rachel told herself she was overreacting. It was just a coat, just another compromise. She folded it once, then unfolded it again, unable to leave it alone. Noah wandered back in, clutching a small toy car. He watched her for a moment, then crouched beside the couch. Can I look at it again? He asked. Rachel hesitated, then nodded. Careful. Noah pressed his fingers into the lining, curious and thorough in the way only children could be. He frowned, then tugged gently. The fabric shifted. Mom, he whispered, excited. There's a hole. Rachel knelt beside him. Up close, she saw it, a small tear along the inner seam, hidden where the lining met the pocket. She reached to stop him, but Noah was already peering inside. There's another pocket, he said proudly. A secret one. Don't pull, Rachel said, trying to keep her voice calm. It might rip. I won't, Noah replied. I'm careful. I'm a treasure hunter. Before she could respond, his hand emerged from the lining. Something metallic caught the light. Noah opened his palm. A key lay there, small, flat, cold-looking. A strip of paper was taped to it, folded tightly. Rachel's breath caught. She took the key from him, her fingers tingling as if she'd touched ice. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges. She unfolded it carefully. Train station. Locker 214. The words were written in block letters, firm but uneven, as if the writer's hand had shaken. Noah tilted his head. Is it a puzzle? He asked. Did Dad make a game for us? Rachel closed her fist around the key. Her heart was beating too fast. Maybe, she said, forcing a smile. But it's a surprise. You can't tell anyone, especially Dad. Noah's eyes widened. Like spies. Like spies, Rachel agreed. The bathroom door opened. Daniel stepped out, the sharp scent of his cologne filling the room. What are you two whispering about? Rachel straightened, slipping the key into her pocket. Nothing, she said quickly. Noah just likes the coat. Daniel glanced at the coat, then at her. I told you where it came from, he said when she asked again, keeping her tone casual. A business partner's wife. It didn't fit her anymore. End of story. There was something too final in the way he said it, as if the explanation had been sealed and filed away. Rachel nodded, though unease had already begun to settle deep in her chest. As Daniel reached for his jacket and Noah ran ahead to put on his shoes, Rachel stayed behind for a moment longer, her hand pressed against her pocket. The key felt heavier than it should have, and for the first time that evening, she knew the coat was no longer just a gift. Rachel told Daniel she was running errands after work the next afternoon. Groceries, a prescription pickup, the usual things that never raised questions. He'd barely looked up from his phone when she said it, only nodded already elsewhere. That indifference made the lie easier to carry. The Portland train station was busier than she expected. The low hum of movement filled the wide hall. Footsteps echoing, a distant announcement crackling over the speakers. The smell of coffee and damp wool coats drifting through the air. Rachel kept her head down, moving with purpose, as though she belonged there for a reason she could explain if asked. She didn't like how exposed she felt. The coat was on her shoulders, heavy and unfamiliar, but she'd worn it anyway. If Daniel came home early and asked where she'd been, she wanted nothing about her appearance to seem out of place. The lockers were downstairs, tucked into a quieter corridor near the restrooms. An older attendant sat at a desk nearby, half asleep, his attention fixed on a newspaper. Rachel slowed, her heart thudding as she counted the numbers. 213, 214. She stopped in front of the metal door. It looked ordinary, scratched and dull. No different from the others. Her hands trembled as she slipped the key into the lock. For a moment, she was certain it wouldn't turn, that the locker would belong to someone else now, that the note was meaningless. Then there was a soft click. The door creaked open. Inside sat a small cardboard shoebox, sealed with layers of yellowed tape. Rachel glanced over her shoulder, then pulled it out quickly and shut the locker again. She didn't want to open it there. She walked fast, almost running, into the women's restroom and locked herself into the farthest stall. The tape resisted at first, then tore with a sharp sound that made her flinch. On top of everything else lay a bundle of letters, neatly stacked and tied with twine. The paper was thin, brittle at the edges, the handwriting slanted and urgent. She read the first line and felt her stomach drop. The letters were dated from the late 1990s. They were written by a man who sounded frightened, desperate, addressing a woman by name. He wrote about interrogations, about being blamed for things he hadn't done, about documents that needed to be hidden if something happened to him. Again and again he mentioned a main organizer, someone whose name he never wrote in full. Beneath the letters were photographs. One showed a young couple standing close together, smiling stiffly at the camera. Another was taken years later, at what looked like a corporate banquet. Rachel's eyes skimmed the unfamiliar faces until they stopped. In the corner of the photo, much younger but unmistakable, stood Daniel. Her breath came shallow. She stared at the image, willing herself to see it differently, to decide it was coincidence. But the posture, the expression, it was him. At the bottom of the box lay a black leather notebook, newer than everything else. Rachel hesitated before opening it. The pages were filled with tight, precise entries, names of companies, dates, amounts, percentages scribbled in the margins, abbreviations she didn't recognize. Then she saw one she did. Daniel's company appeared several times, always alongside figures that made her pulse race. 6-digit sums, notes about returns, cuts, timing. One entry stood out, written in red ink, the handwriting less steady than the rest. D. Must settle by the 15th. Amount outstanding. Rachel checked the date. The 15th had been yesterday. Her birthday. Money in circulation, Daniel had said. Deadlines she hadn't known existed suddenly made sense of his impatience, his tension. The way he had watched her reaction to the coat too closely. A memory surfaced without warning. A month earlier, a woman had approached their table at a cafe, older, elegant. Her gaze sharp. Daniel had gone pale when she greeted him by name. He'd introduced her as a former colleague, brushed it off as nothing. Rachel closed the notebook, pressing it to her chest as if it might steady her. The sounds of the restroom returned all at once. The flush of a toilet, the murmur of voices, the scrape of shoes against tile. She felt exposed, as though everyone could see the truth she was only beginning to understand. This wasn't just about a second-hand coat. It wasn't even about a bad marriage. It was about crimes that stretched back decades, about money that didn't belong to the people holding it, about threats that didn't need to be spoken, allowed to be understood. And somehow, impossibly, Daniel was standing in the middle of it. Rachel repacked the box with shaking hands, sealing it as best she could. She slipped the notebook into her bag, hiding it beneath mundane items, receipts, a notebook from school, her wallet. When she finally stepped back into the station, the air felt colder. Every face looked unfamiliar, every sound too loud. As she walked toward the exit, one thought pressed in on her with terrifying clarity. Whatever this was, there was no going back. The first line had been crossed, and the life she thought she understood was already receding behind her. Rachel waited until evening before going next door. The apartment felt too quiet after the train station, every shadow sharper than it had been before. She told Daniel she had a headache and needed air. He barely acknowledged her, already absorbed in his screen, tension radiating from him in a way she could now recognize for what it was. Harold Bennett lived one floor down. He was in his late 60s, broad-shouldered, even with age, his movements careful but deliberate. He opened the door with a look of mild surprise that shifted quickly to concern when he saw her face. "Rachel," he said, "you look like you've seen a ghost." "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. His apartment smelled faintly of old books and black tea. Files were stacked neatly along one wall, the habit of a man who had never quite stopped organizing evidence. Harold motioned for her to sit at the small kitchen table, then poured tea without asking. Rachel hesitated, then placed the notebook and a few of the letters on the table between them. Her hands shook despite her effort to keep them still. "I don't know if I should even be showing you this," she said, "but I don't know who else to ask." Harold adjusted his glasses and began to read. At first, his expression was neutral. Then it changed, subtly but unmistakably. His jaw tightened. He flipped to another page, then another, moving more slowly now. "These names," he said at last. "Where did you get this?" Rachel told him about the locker, the key, the coat. She skipped nothing, though saying it aloud made the whole thing feel even more unreal. Harold leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. "I thought this was gone," he said quietly. "Gone?" Rachel echoed. "Buried," he corrected. "Late 90s. Industrial patents. A major manufacturing firm. There was a huge investigation, on paper. One man took the fall. An engineer. Smart, meticulous. They said he acted alone." "And he didn't," Rachel said. Harold shook his head. "No. He was a scapegoat. Everyone who worked the case seriously knew it. But the pressure came from higher up. The investigation stalled. Evidence disappeared. The file was closed." Rachel's chest tightened. So the crimes were never solved. "They were never allowed to be," Harold said. He tapped the notebook. This looks like someone kept score. Blackmail, leverage, payments. And this red entry here." He pointed. "That's a deadline. The kind people don't miss unless they think they're untouchable or desperate." Rachel swallowed. "My husband has been different. Controlling. Threatening, even. He talks about money like it's a weapon." Harold met her eyes. "Then you need to understand something very clearly," he said. "If your husband is connected to this, even indirectly, you're not just dealing with a dishonest man. You're dealing with people who don't want witnesses." The word settled heavily between them. "What do I do?" Rachel asked. "First," Harold said, "you make copies, digital and physical. You keep the originals somewhere no one would ever think to look, not in your apartment, not in a place tied to you. And Daniel—" "You say nothing," Harold replied without hesitation. "You behave exactly as you have been. Any change could put you at risk." Rachel nodded, though fear crept up her spine. "Do you think he knows I found this?" Harold considered the question carefully. "If he does, he hasn't shown his hand yet. That means time. Not much, but some." Rachel gathered the papers, her movements more controlled now. Hearing someone else confirm her suspicions, confirm that this wasn't paranoia, felt both terrifying and grounding. As she stood to leave, Harold placed a hand over the notebook for a brief moment. "I spent my career watching the truth get buried," he said. "I won't watch it happen again if I can help it. But you have to be careful." Rachel stepped back into the hallway, the door closing softly behind her. The fear was still there, sharp and real. But beneath it was something new. For the first time since the coat had entered her life, she knew she wasn't imagining the danger, and she knew she wasn't alone. The call from the school came 2 days later. Rachel had been standing at the kitchen counter, sorting papers from her bag, when her phone rang. The number was familiar. She felt a tightening in her chest even before she answered. They asked her to come in after classes ended. Noah had never been a difficult child. He was sensitive, yes, quick to retreat when voices were raised, but gentle with other children, thoughtful in ways that often surprised adults. That was why the teacher's words unsettled her so deeply. Anxiety, a fight on the playground, drawings that didn't look like anything he had brought home before. Rachel arrived at the school while the hallways were still noisy with students leaving. She found Noah sitting on a bench outside the counseling office, his shoulders hunched, his backpack clutched tightly in his lap. He looked up when he saw her, relief flashing across his face. "I didn't mean to," he said immediately. "He pushed me first." "I know," Rachel said, smoothing his hair. "It's okay." The school psychologist introduced himself moments later. Andrew Cole was younger than she expected, early 30s at most, with a calm presence that seemed to soften the air around him. His voice was low, measured, unhurried. "Why don't Noah and I start with something simple?" he said. "I have some building sets in here." Noah hesitated, then followed him inside. Rachel remained seated across the desk, her hands folded tightly in her lap, while Noah built quietly on the floor. Andrew spread several drawings across the desk. Rachel recognized her son's style immediately, bold colors, careful lines, but the images themselves made her throat tighten. In one, a small figure stood behind a tree. In another, a dark shape loomed over a box, its edges sharp, its eyes exaggerated. In every drawing, something was hidden. Something was waiting. "These aren't signs of pathology," Andrew said gently, as if sensing her thoughts. "They're signs of perceived threat." "Threat," Rachel repeated. "Children mirror their environment," he explained. "When something feels unstable at home, they don't always have the words for it. They draw it instead. They act it out." Rachel looked toward the door, then back at him. "He's not sick," she said. More statement than question. "No," Andrew replied. "He's afraid." The word settled heavily between them. Rachel pressed her lips together, trying to keep her composure. "I've been telling myself everything is fine," she said finally. "That I'm just tired. That he doesn't notice." Andrew met her eyes. Children notice long before adults admit there's something wrong. For a moment, the room felt very small. Rachel's hands tightened around her scarf. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "I don't feel safe," she said. Saying it out loud felt like crossing a line she hadn't known existed. "And I think he knows." Andrew nodded slowly. "Then the first priority is restoring a sense of safety. For both of you." "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means support," he said. "Consistency. And sometimes help that goes beyond my role here." He slid a card across the desk. His personal number was written on it, not the school's. "This isn't a formal recommendation," he said carefully, "but if you ever feel overwhelmed or if you think Noah is in immediate distress, you can call. As a person, not just a psychologist." Rachel stared at the card, then nodded. "Thank you." Noah looked up from his building set. "Can monsters be beaten?" he asked suddenly. Andrew crouched beside him. "They can," he said, "especially when you find the right allies. And when you turn on the light." As they left the office, Rachel felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. The fear was still there, sharp and insistent, but alongside it was something else. For the first time since the locker at the train station, she felt a fragile, cautious sense of hope. Daniel brought it up casually, as if it were a scheduling detail rather than a decision that would tear their lives apart. They were in the kitchen, late evening. Noah was already asleep. The apartment finally quiet. Daniel stood by the counter, scrolling through his phone, his tone deliberately light. "I've been thinking about Noah's future," he said. "There's a private institution overseas. Very selective. Excellent discipline. Structure. Connections." Rachel looked up from the sink. "Overseas?" "Yes." Daniel set the phone down and met her gaze for the first time that evening. "It's settled. I've already made inquiries." Her hand stilled. "He's 7. And impressionable," Daniel replied. "This is the best time to shape him properly." Rachel turned off the water. "You didn't discuss this with me." "I didn't need to," he said evenly. "I'll handle the paperwork." The way he said it, calm, confident, sent a cold wave through her. "I won't agree to this," she said. "You can't just take our son and send him away." Daniel's expression changed then. Not anger. Something sharper. "I can," he said. "And I will if I have to." Rachel felt her pulse quicken. "On what grounds?" Daniel smiled, thin and precise. "On the grounds that you're unstable." The word landed like a slap. "I have evaluations," he continued. "Professional ones. They show that Noah is under emotional stress because of you. Anxiety, poor impulse control, a harmful home environment." "That's a lie," Rachel said, her voice trembling despite her effort to control it. "Is it?" Daniel shrugged. "Courts don't like uncertainty. I'm offering him security. A future. You're offering what exactly?" "A teacher's salary and mood swings." Rachel stared at him, seeing his face clearly for the first time, not as her husband, but as someone calculating outcomes. "If you fight me," he added quietly, "you'll lose. And Noah will go where I decide. You'll be labeled unfit. Think carefully." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Daniel picked up his phone again, already finished with the conversation. Later that night, when Daniel was asleep, Rachel sat alone at the dining table with her laptop open. Andrew's voice played softly through her headphones, careful and calm. "Take your time," he said. "If anything feels wrong, stop." Rachel moved quietly into Daniel's home office. The room smelled faintly of cologne and new electronics. She photographed the keyboard with her phone, sent the image, then waited, her breath shallow. A message appeared minutes later. A date. Daniel's birthday. The password worked. Her hands shook as the desktop loaded. Folders filled the screen. Work files, invoices. Presentations. Andrew guided her, step by step. Look for anything labeled personal. Initials. Hidden directories. She found it quickly. A folder marked with a single letter. Inside were photographs. Rachel's stomach clenched. The woman in the images was young, visibly pregnant, standing close to Daniel. His arm rested possessively around her shoulders. The caption beneath one photo made her chest tighten. "Alina." She swallowed hard and kept going. Another folder contained property documents, a mortgage agreement, a newly purchased apartment, not in their names. Registered owner, Alina Petrova. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, then opened the final directory Andrew had mentioned. It was labeled simply Reports. The first file was a psychological evaluation. She recognized the format immediately, the language, the structure. It was supposed to describe Noah. But as she read, her hands began to shake. The conclusions were devastating. Claims of emotional instability, allegations of neglect, recommendations for specialized institutional care, subtle suggestions that the mother was the source of distress. "This isn't real," Rachel whispered. "It's fabricated," Andrew said, his voice steady but tight. "I work with Noah. These conclusions are false." "There's more," Rachel said, scrolling. Another report, and another, each one reinforcing the same narrative, each one designed to build a case against her. "He bought these," Andrew said, "or pressured someone to write them." Rachel leaned back in the chair, her vision blurring. Betrayal washed over her in waves. Betrayal of their marriage, of her trust, of their child. He was planning this, she said. All of it. Yes, Andrew replied. And now you know. Rachel copied the files carefully, transferring everything onto a flash drive. She double-checked each folder, each image, each document. When she finally shut the computer down, the apartment felt different. Smaller, unsafe. She returned to the bedroom and lay awake beside Daniel, listening to his breathing. Every calm inhale felt like a lie. By morning, fear had settled into something harder, a resolve born not of anger, but of survival. Daniel thought he had control. Rachel knew now that the fight for her son had already begun. Rachel waited until late afternoon. When the light began to fade and the city softened into its gray-blue quiet, Evelyn Sokoloff had been careful in recent days, changing routines, keeping meetings brief, but there were patterns even careful people didn't realize they kept. Thursdays, the park cafe with the open terrace, a place public enough to feel safe, exposed enough to discourage eavesdroppers. Rachel followed at a distance, her hood pulled low, her steps measured. She told herself to turn back more than once. Each time, the memory of Daniel's calm threat, unfit, unstable, pushed her forward. The cafe sat at the edge of the park, heaters glowing faintly under the awning. Evelyn arrived first. She wore an expensive scarf and sat at a corner table, her posture rigid, eyes scanning the path as if counting exits. She ordered tea and didn't touch it. Rachel stopped behind a line of winter shrubs a few yards away. From there, she could see without being seen. The wind carried fragments of conversation from other tables, laughter, the scrape of chairs, but the corner where Evelyn sat remained oddly quiet. Then someone approached. Rachel recognized the walk before she recognized the face. Confident, familiar, a bright jacket she had complimented more than once. Megan Price sat down across from Evelyn without hesitation. For a moment, Rachel's mind refused to accept what her eyes were telling her. Megan, her closest friend, the one who had listened to her worries, who had defended Daniel when Rachel doubted herself. Megan, who knew their schedules, their habits, their weaknesses. The shock was physical. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. The conversation started low, but the terrace was open, the winter air sharp and clear. Certain words carried. "He's getting reckless," Evelyn said, her voice controlled. "He thinks he can pressure me." "He will calm down," Megan replied quickly. "He always does. He's moving assets through shell accounts. It takes time." "Time is not what we have," Evelyn said. "You promised you'd keep an eye on him." "I am," Megan insisted. "His wife suspects nothing. I play the concerned friend. She tells me everything." Rachel felt the ground tilt. "And if he runs?" Evelyn asked. "He won't go alone." Megan hesitated. "He'll take the boy. As leverage." "Good," Evelyn said flatly. "Children are effective shields." Rachel's breath came shallow. She pressed herself closer to the tree, the bark cold against her palm. "And the wife?" Megan asked. There was a pause. Evelyn's voice dropped. "If she becomes a problem, accidents happen. Brake lines fail. Ice does the rest. No one questions whether." Rachel's knees weakened. She shifted her weight, and a twig snapped beneath her boot. Megan's head turned sharply. "Did you hear that?" Rachel froze, her pulse roaring in her ears. Evelyn didn't look up. "Wind," she said after a moment. "Finish what you're saying." Rachel used the sound of a passing jogger to slip backward, step by careful step, until the cafe was hidden by trees. She didn't stop moving until she reached the sidewalk, her legs trembling. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from Daniel. "You said you were at your mother's. You're not. Where are you?" The words blurred as panic surged. He knew, or suspected enough to test her. Rachel didn't reply. She turned down a side street, then another, weaving through traffic until the park was behind her. Every passing car felt like pursuit. Every stranger felt like eyes. By the time she reached her building, dusk had settled fully. She climbed the stairs instead of taking the elevator, listening for footsteps that never came. Inside the apartment, she locked the door and leaned against it, shaking. The betrayal cut deeper than she had imagined, not because it was dramatic, but because it was ordinary, because it had worn a friendly face. Megan had been there for years, had watched Noah grow, had smiled at Rachel's table. Rachel slid down to the floor, her back against the door, her phone clutched in her hand. The danger was no longer abstract. It had names, voices, plans, and time, whatever little she had, was running out. Andrew read the first letter twice before he understood why his hands were shaking. The paper was thin, yellowed at the edges, the ink uneven in places, as if the writer's grip had tightened mid-sentence. The language was careful, restrained, but underneath it pulsed something urgent and terrified. Andrew had spent years reading people, patterns in speech, pauses, emotional tells, but this was different. This was not analysis. This was recognition. He sat very still at the kitchen table, the letters spread before him, while Rachel watched from across the room, afraid to interrupt. "These aren't just old documents," Andrew said finally. His voice sounded distant, almost detached. "This is my family." Rachel felt her chest tighten. "What do you mean?" Andrew lifted one page and turned it so she could see the signature at the bottom. The name was written in a neat, slanted hand. "Valentina S. My mother's name was Valentina," he said. "Valentina Sokoloff. She disappeared when I was 7. Rachel said nothing. She didn't trust her voice. Andrew kept reading. Faster now, his eyes moving with a growing intensity. The letters spoke of interrogations, of pressure from business partners, of documents hidden where books sleep if things went wrong. One passage repeated the same sentence twice, as if the writer needed to convince himself it was true. "If something happens to me, this is your protection." Andrew closed his eyes. "My father was an engineer," he continued. "A brilliant one. He worked on industrial designs that were later patented under someone else's name. When the scandal broke, he was blamed, arrested. He died in custody, or that's what they told us." Rachel remembered Harold's words. "Buried, not solved." "And your mother?" she asked softly. Andrew exhaled. "Vanished. No body. No explanation. I grew up believing she abandoned me." He opened the modern ledger next. The handwriting was different, older, heavier, deliberate. The name on the inside cover made his stomach drop. "Evelyn Sokoloff." "It's an alias," Andrew said. "A clean one. New identity. Same initials. Same patterns in her writing." Rachel felt the room tilt. "Evelyn is your mother?" "Yes." The word landed with quiet finality. The realization didn't come with shock. It came with grief. Slow, crushing, inevitable. Andrew leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as if it might offer answers it had withheld for decades. "She didn't run from us," he said. "She ran with something. Evidence. Insurance." Rachel slid the leather folder closer. "There's more." Andrew opened it carefully. Inside were blueprints, technical drawings annotated in his father's handwriting, and beneath them a notarized document dated nearly 25 years earlier. A will. Andrew read it in silence. His jaw tightened, then trembled. "He left everything to me," he said hoarsely. "The patents, the intellectual rights, even instructions on how to reclaim them if the truth ever surfaced." Rachel watched him absorb it. The truth that his father had not been a criminal, that his mother had not been heartless, that his entire life had been shaped by a lie large enough to swallow generations. "And she kept this hidden," Rachel said, "all these years." "Because someone owned her fear," Andrew replied. "The same people Daniel is tied to now." He stood abruptly and began pacing the room, running a hand through his hair. She protected the truth, but she also protected herself. She made a choice, and that choice left a child behind. Rachel saw the conflict play across his face. Anger, sorrow, empathy all colliding at once. "What do you want to do?" she asked. Andrew stopped and looked at her. "For years, I thought survival meant staying quiet," he said. "Being useful, being invisible. But this," he gestured to the documents, "this isn't just about clearing my father's name. It's about ending a cycle." He knelt beside the table and gathered the papers with deliberate care. "Daniel thinks this is leverage. Evelyn thinks it's insurance. They're both wrong." Rachel felt something settle in her chest. Not relief, but clarity. "So we don't just hide," she said. "No," Andrew agreed. "We act." There was no bravado in his voice. No revenge fue anger. Just certainty. We document everything. We involve people who can't be bought. We make it public enough that it can't be buried again. Rachel nodded. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled her. For the first time since her birthday night, she didn't feel alone inside it. Andrew looked at her then, not as a psychologist, not as a man stepping in, but as someone choosing a direction with her. "They tried to use the past as a weapon," he said. "Instead, it becomes the evidence that ends them." Outside, the evening deepened into night. Inside the apartment, 2 stories, one buried for decades, the other unfolding in real time, finally aligned. The collision was painful, but it was also irreversible. And for the first time, both of them understood. This wasn't just about surviving what was coming next. It was about making sure the truth stayed standing when the dust settled. The warning came minutes before disaster. Andrew's voice was sharp in Rachel's ear as she stood near the school parking lot, Noah's backpack slung over her shoulder. "Don't get in the car. Step away from it now." Rachel froze. "What are you talking about?" "A student overheard something," Andrew said, already moving. "They mentioned brake failure. Rachel, listen to me. Take Noah and go to the service exit. I'll be there in 2 minutes." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She didn't ask questions. She took Noah's hand and turned away from the car she had parked there just an hour earlier. Noah sensed the shift immediately, his fingers tightening around hers. "What's wrong?" he whispered. "Nothing," she said, forcing calm into her voice. "We're just changing plans." Andrew's truck pulled up moments later, tires crunching against the icy pavement. He ushered them inside without explanation and drove off before Rachel had fully closed her door. Only when they were several blocks away did he speak. "They were going to make it look like an accident," he said. "Ice, speed, mechanical failure." Rachel closed her eyes, the reality settling like a physical weight. She thought of Megan's voice at the cafe. Brake lines fail. Andrew didn't take them home. He drove north, away from the city, the roads narrowing as daylight faded and snow thickened. By the time they reached the cabin, an old structure tucked deep into forest land, the storm had become a white wall. The cabin was basic but solid. A fireplace, a generator, no cell service strong enough for tracking. Andrew moved with practiced efficiency, securing doors, lighting the fire, checking the perimeter. "This is temporary," he said, handing Rachel a mug of tea. "Law enforcement is moving now. We just need to stay out of reach." Rachel watched Noah curl up on the couch, exhausted, safe for the moment. Her hands shook as the adrenaline drained. By morning, everything changed. Arrests unfolded quickly and quietly without spectacle. Daniel was taken in at a downtown office he had tried to liquidate overnight. Megan was arrested at her apartment, financial records already flagged and frozen. Evelyn Sokoloff was detained under her legal name, Valentina Sokoloff, her aliases collapsing under scrutiny. The benefactor who had financed the entire scheme followed within hours. The charges were extensive: fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, endangerment. The evidence was overwhelming. But for Rachel, the most painful battle wasn't criminal. It was family court. That night, Rachel heard a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find Daniel's mother standing in the hallway, coat buttoned, hands clasped in front of her. Her eyes looked older than Rachel remembered, tired in a way that went beyond age. "May I come in?" she asked. Rachel hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat at the kitchen table without speaking for a long moment. Finally, the older woman reached into her purse and pulled out a thin envelope. Inside were copies, papers Rachel had seen before in Daniel's files, psychological reports, financial summaries, all signed, all false. "I didn't know what he was planning," she said quietly, "but I knew he asked me to sign. For the process," he said, "just in case. I believed him. I wanted to believe him." Rachel's throat tightened. "I saw what he became," the woman continued, "and I said nothing, because I'm his mother, because I thought I was helping. But when he started speaking of Noah as if he were property," she looked down at her hands, "I won't lie in that courtroom. Not again. He won't use me the way he uses everyone else." Rachel didn't respond. She simply reached across the table and covered the woman's hand with her own. For the first time in months, she felt the past beginning to shift. Daniel appeared via secure transport, thinner, more controlled, wearing the same calm expression he had used for years. His attorney spoke smoothly, painting a familiar picture: an unstable mother, a father burdened but devoted, a child needing structure. Rachel listened without reacting, her hands folded in her lap. She had learned what Daniel's calm really was. When it was his turn to speak, Daniel looked directly at her. "I only wanted what was best for my son," he said evenly. "Everything I did was to protect his future." The judge's gaze didn't soften. Rachel's attorney called the next witness. Daniel's mother stepped forward. She was smaller than Rachel remembered, her shoulders slightly stooped, but her voice didn't waver. She spoke of the documents Daniel had demanded, the plans he had described without shame, the way he had referred to Noah as leverage. She spoke slowly, deliberately, as if each word carried weight she had resisted for years. Then the recording was played. Daniel's voice filled the courtroom, clear, unguarded, cruel. "I'll take the boy, just to keep her quiet. He's insurance. I don't need him otherwise." The room went silent. Rachel didn't look at Daniel. She didn't need to. The judge recessed briefly. When she returned, her ruling was decisive. Daniel's parental rights were terminated in full. No appeals. No shared custody. No supervised visits. It was over. Rachel felt no triumph, only exhaustion so deep it bordered on numbness. She held Noah afterward as he cried, quietly, not in fear but in release. Later, when the storm had passed and the city resumed its routines, Rachel stood outside the courthouse and breathed air that felt different. Lighter. Andrew joined her, hands in his coat pockets, his posture finally relaxed. "You did everything right," he said. Rachel shook her head. "I survived," she replied. "That's all." He looked at Noah, who was talking animatedly with Daniel's mother a few steps away, already reclaiming small pieces of childhood that had been held hostage. "That's more than enough," Andrew said. The control Daniel had once wielded collapsed, not with violence or spectacle, but with truth, patience, and witnesses who refused to look away. What remained was quiet, and for the first time it felt honest. The work Andrew had waited his entire life to do began quietly. There were no press conferences, no triumphant speeches, just meetings in plain offices, long hours reviewing documents, and patient coordination with investigators who finally had what they needed. The patents stolen decades earlier were traced, verified, and legally restored. His father's name, once reduced to a footnote in a closed case, returned to the record where it belonged. Not as a criminal, as an innovator. Andrew attended the final hearing alone. When the ruling came down, he felt neither celebration nor anger, only relief. A weight he had carried without knowing its shape finally lifted. His father's work was acknowledged, his innocence recorded, the lie ended. Evelyn Sokolov, Valentina as she was known again, chose cooperation. It didn't erase what she had done or the years she had disappeared, but it mattered. She named accounts, intermediaries, and beneficiaries. Funds were recovered. A portion was returned to the programs that had been exploited. Quiet restitution where noise would have felt wrong. When Andrew met her once more, it was brief. There were no apologies big enough to fill the space between them. She spoke of fear, of bad choices made to survive and worse ones made to stay hidden. Andrew listened. He didn't forgive, not fully, but he accepted the truth she offered, and with it the chance to close a chapter that had been left open too long. 6 months later, the world looked different. Rachel stood in the kitchen early one morning, sunlight slanting across the counter. She rested a hand over the gentle curve beneath her sweater, breathing in the ordinary calm of the moment. The doctor's visits were routine now. The fear that had once lived in her chest no longer dictated her days. Noah was laughing in the living room, building something elaborate on the floor. His drawings had changed. The monsters were gone. In their place were houses, trees, people standing close together. When he slept deeply. The family they were building wasn't loud or dramatic. It was deliberate. Andrew moved through their days with quiet steadiness. He didn't rush roles or claim space that wasn't offered. He showed up. He listened. He made safety visible, not through control, but through consistency. One evening, as autumn settled in, Andrew handed Rachel a small box. Inside was a simple set of keys. A home, a car, a place for Noah's bike. Nothing ornate, nothing hidden. No compartments, he said gently. No secrets. Rachel smiled, her eyes bright with something that looked like peace. They didn't talk about the past often. When they did, it was without the urgency it once demanded. The truth had done its work. Boundaries held where silence once stood. Life didn't become perfect. It became honest. And that was enough. On a crisp morning not long after, they stood together on a quiet porch, coffee warming their hands. Noah leaned against Andrew's side, half asleep, content. Rachel watched them, the scene ordinary in the best possible way. Safety, she had learned, wasn't a promise made loudly. It was built slowly, choice by choice, day by day. Dignity wasn't reclaimed through confrontation. It returned when she stopped accepting what diminished her. Family, she realized, wasn't something you were trapped inside. It was something you chose and protected